see. Hey guys.
Oh, Rick, come on in, grab a chair.
Okay, so I'm sitting in my bunker.
Another war story? I'm so sick about talking about the war. Can we talk about something else?
Like what?
We can talk about pride and passion.
Nah, I heard some other guys are talking about that.
How about sports?
What kind of sports?
How about sports from this decade?
And games.
Why do you always want to talk about games? You're a grown man.
Well, some pretty interesting stuff has sprouted up in the gaming world. Like the first video game. The Castle Gray Tube amusement device was an interactive game that was inspired by the World War II radars. Also, there were board games like Candyland, Shoots and Ladders, and Clue.
I don't care about dumb games. I only focus on manly things. Baseball. Baseball's so great, President Roosevelt himself wrote the green light letter to encourage it to continue during the war. In the past 10 years, the Cardinals and the Dodgers have been in a brutal battle for the National League pennant. And just recently, the Dodgers picked up some Negro by the name of Jackie Robinson.
What, you saying I ain't manly?
Don't snap your cap, George.
Hush, Betty. Only veterans talk here.
Hey, I am a veteran. I was a nurse, remember?
I'm talking front lines. Anyways, auto racing is becoming more and more popular every day. Galley built France formed NASCAR in 1947, and horse racing is still very smooth. Seabiscuit won his final race in 1940, and the Triple Crown is cool.
I served on the front lines with Joe DiMaggio. He'd always talk about his hitting streak back in 1941. His brother Don was in the Marines. He was always worrying about Don.
Well, plenty of boxers took powder during the war, you know, except for that pansy Sugar Ray Robinson. And when we were over there fighting in Europe, he was uncontested becoming the welterweight champion of the world. And the reason he didn't go over, he faked an injury in training, never won over Europe.
Well, it's obvious golf is the only game of any class. If only it hadn't suffered so significantly during the war. Do you guys know that only 22 of the possible 36 majors were played this decade? 14 were canceled because of the war. And those were easily dominated by Byron Nelson, Ben Hogan, and Steve Snead. And of course, there were constant conflicts between the professionals and the amateurs.
That's nothing. These are just little tournaments. The Olympics were canceled twice, 4 times to count the Winter Olympics.
Fair enough. Tennis was pretty hostile in the 1940s as well. Men like Nick Carter and Ted Schroeder were eligible to turn professional, but decided against it to stand against the conservative nature of the pros.
All that may be, but hockey's swell. Did you know in 1940 the first hockey puck was used in the game? All prior games had used a ball.
That is true, but I say football's in the groove. Did you hear that Michigan is one of the top teams in this nation? Herbert Fitzbissler turned them into national champions in 1941.
You guys want to know something that's really interesting?
Betty, please.
Let her talk, Larry.
Basketball didn't experience many major changes because the players' height often made them ineligible for military service. Also, the Basketball Association of America and the National Basketball League merged together to form the NBA in 1949.
Well, this sports talk is interesting and all, but we came here to talk about the war. You don't like that, Rick. There's the door.
Alright, that's the Valentina.
I don't know.
Okay.
Alright, so the first video game was invented in the 1940s. It was called the Castle Gray Tube amusement device, and there was a picture right here. There it is. So a beam of light would shoot out and refract onto the screen, which is right here. And it was a simulation of the missiles shooting on like a radar, a submarine. There are also board games like Candyland, Shoots and Ladders, and Clue. I'm sure you're all familiar with all 3 of those. There are also toys like Silly Putty. Originally, it was called Bouncing Putty, and it was created due to the lack of rubber that was able to get into the U.S. So scientists set to work to start making a synthetic rubber. And one guy, a Scottish scientist, created this rubber and accidentally dropped it and it started to bounce. He said that's pretty interesting. He picked it up and found out that it was polymerized, which means you can mold it and move it around. And there was also Tonka trucks and Frisbees. And Frisbees, it's actually a funny story because have you guys ever seen college kids playing Frisbee? Well, the tradition started a really long time ago, where the Frisbee Baking Company would sell pies to college students in New England, and the students figured that The pie pans, once empty, could be thrown like a disc. And in 1948, Mr. Walter Ferdinand created and his partner created a plastic disc that could be thrown easier and farther. There's also pinball, but it was banned in the 1940s due to, it was considered a gambling activity, so it was banned in the 1940s.
You can see in the picture that they're taking a sledgehammer to a pinball machine.
The Olympic Games were canceled twice during the war in 40 and 44 because of the war in Europe and Asia. It was originally supposed to be held in Japan in 1940 and then London in 1944, but they were postponed until 1948 in London again. Interestingly enough, London was on rations at the time, so their economy wasn't doing so good, so they didn't build any new stadiums or an Olympic village. They just used existing stadiums and relied on residents to put up the athletes. The good thing about the Olympics, again, is that it promotes international friendship. So it was a major turning point, and well, not really a turning point, but a building block to bring back normalcy among international waters. But the Axis were not allowed to participate until 1952. Boxing, like many other sports, all their big athletes went and joined the war effort, except for Sugar Ray Robinson, who is pictured on the right there. He allegedly faked an injury in training and did not have to serve over in Europe, and then he became the welterweight champion of the world in the 1940s.
Okay, auto racing, much like in the 1930s, was still kind of grassroots, but Indy 500 and Indy racing was becoming more popular, and 1947, Bill France won NASCAR. Wilbur Shaw won back-to-back Indy 500s in 1940, which is a pretty incredible feat.
And this is the modern NASCAR logo, not to be confused with the 1940s.
This clip is from a documentary, so there is some modern talking, but the footage is from the 40s.
Early next year, Schumacher is well on his way to winning for a third consecutive year and a record fourth overall, but he suffers a back injury when a collapsed right wheel sends him into the wall while he is leading at the three-quarter mark. It turns out to be his final race. The entry of America into World War II will bring racing to a halt for 4 years, after which Shaw will play a major role in saving the speedway from extinction.
And this right here is just a little bit of a clip from early 1940s NASCAR racing. Or, well, it wasn't NASCAR at that time, but it was dirt track racing.
Looks the same.
Basketball in the 1940s didn't experience a lot of major changes, mostly because the players' height made them ineligible for military service. And also, Joe Fultz of the Philadelphia Warriors, he had scored 63 points by himself when most of the other teams didn't even reach that altogether. On June 6, 1946, the Basketball Association of America merged with the National Basketball League to form the NBA. And also, Jerry West is the person who's on the NBA logo, and the jump shot was becoming popular.
Okay, horse racing in the 1940s was still pretty popular. There was 4 Triple Crown races. In 1941, Whirl Away won. 1943, Count Fleet won. 1946, Assault won. And 1948, Citation won. All these horses were thoroughbreds. And in 1940, Seabiscuit was in his final race, which he won. Racing is still pretty popular.
Brought back in 1940, the challenge to 1939 winner is on stablemate Kayak II, and 11 other runners.
Seabiscuit on the outside is second, Manning. Specify on the rail is third, by an next, Royal Speeder, good as third, by 1 length, and by county, into the stretch.
I edited some of